Hi everyone, welcome to today's cooking class. The theme is fall and winter seasonal vegetables. And I want to show you some recipes that you can make for the holidays that will hopefully impress your guests. I'm going to be moving pretty quickly, so we'll try to save questions for the end. But since this class is virtual, I had to change things around and it'll be a little rushed, so I apologize in advance. So let's just get started. The first thing that we're going to make is a whole roasted cauliflower. Um, so I like this recipe because it's pretty easy to make. Um, all you really have to do is make a marinade and then toss the cauliflower in it and then just throw the whole thing in the oven. But it is a little tricky, and I'll tell you why as we go along. Um, and it just looks really pretty when it's on the table. It looks very impressive for some reason when it's still in its whole form. So the first thing you want to do is cut off the extra leaves in the base, the bottom of the cauliflower, but don't cut too much off. Like, don't cut deep into this core because then it will fall apart. So you just want to cut off all the extra leaves. And then we're gonna be marinating it, and you want to get the marinade all over the cauliflower as much as possible so that it's not just on the surface. You want to make sure the flavor gets everywhere. So I'm also going to take the knife and just make a few little cuts on top so the marinade can get in there. And then that's it for now. So we'll set that aside. Now we're going to make a marinade. This recipe is from a website called Vegan Richa, and she has lots of great plant-based recipes. And this one, I've tried a few different recipes for roasted cauliflower, and this one is one of my favorites because it has a lot of flavor. So I went ahead and pre-measured all the spices here. You can see on the overhead camera, we have garlic powder, onion powder, sage, smoked paprika, thyme, salt, and pepper. So we're going to use all of those and then a few liquid ingredients. So I'm going to just measure those into our bowl. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of oil. I'm just going to use olive oil. Doesn't really matter which one you use, whatever is easy for you because it's a pretty small amount. You just need a little bit of oil in there. Um, we're also going to use a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. If you need it to be vegan, then there are vegan Worcestershire sauces out there. And if you don't want to use it or don't have it, it's kind of optional, but it does give it a nice rich flavor and also makes the marinade a little bit darker so that the cauliflower comes out nice and roasty looking. We're also going to use 2 tablespoons of tamari or soy sauce in the marinade, and we're going to save an extra half of a tablespoon for later, and I'll tell you why. So tamari is like soy sauce, it just doesn't have the wheat in it. So if you are making this for somebody who has a wheat allergy or gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, then tamari is generally safe. Still check the labels to make sure it's gluten-free, but I like it because it has a lot of flavor, and I'm using one that has a little less sodium. It has 25% less sodium. So it still has a lot of salt, but a little bit less. But we just don't need to add as much salt to the marinade since there is salt in the tamari. And then we're also going to add some maple syrup, just a little bit. We're going to add 1 tablespoon. It's not going to, it's a relatively small amount in the marinade. So I'm actually using a maple agave blend because that's just what I had on hand, but it's not really a big deal what type of liquid sweetener you use. And that's it for the liquids. So now I'm just going to mix in all those spices, stir it up. So if you joined a little late, I'm working on the whole roasted cauliflower. The recipes are linked in the chat and also the BeCal event. So we're making a marinade for the roasted cauliflower, which I have already trimmed, cut some little holes in the top to make sure the marinade gets all up in there. Okay, so now we're gonna roast this in a pan. I would use something that has a bit of a lip or an edge around it so the marinade doesn't go everywhere. So I'm gonna use a cast iron skillet. And I've tried this recipe a few times, and I find that if you're not careful, the marinade can kind of scorch on the bottom. So I like to put down some parchment paper. And that will just help catch everything and makes cleanup a lot easier. So I'll just kind of tuck in the edges here. Okay. So I'm just going to do this right over the pan because the marinade is going to kind of get everywhere. So you can see that on the overhead view. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take about half of the marinade and pour it down the middle or the underside of the cauliflower. And you might want to move some of these, any extra little pieces of leaves out of the way so they don't get in the way. If you skip this step, you'll only get the marinade on the outside of the cauliflower. And when you go to slice it and cut it up, then the flavor will just be kind of on that one little side. So we want to make sure that we get the flavor all surrounding the cauliflower. So I'm pouring about half of it in the top, and I'll try to raise it up so you can see it. I'm just going to kind of rotate it around so that it's coating the insides of the cauliflower florets. And let's put a little bit more in there. And I wish you could smell this. It smells really flavorful. We used all kinds of herbs and spices in here. And if there's one that, you just don't have, there's so much other flavor, you could probably skip it. But that's one of the reasons why I like this recipe in particular, is that I think it's so flavorful. But you could also do a more basic version of this recipe, maybe just coat it with some olive oil, salt, pepper, and garlic. But since I wanted to show you some recipes before the holiday season really gets going, if you want to make it a little more impressive, you could make it really rich with all the right seasonings and spices. Okay, so I've got it all covered. You can see how dark colored this is from the tamari and the Worcestershire sauce. So it's going to look really nice. So since, we're kind of rushing in this class a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and pop it in the oven. But first, I'm actually going to cover it. And you want to cover the cauliflower. You can use a baking dish. You don't have to cover it so it's completely sealed. This is going to help create a little steam to help it cook faster. Okay, so I'm going to start that at 30 minutes. So if you were to just throw a cauliflower in the oven hole, it would probably burn on the outside before the inside is cooked. It would end up kind of crunchy. So that's one way that you can make sure that it cooks more evenly and quickly. I also recommend using a small to medium-sized cauliflower, because if you use one of those big giant ones, it's just not gonna cook in time, or it's gonna take a really long time. So I would, to be safe, I'd use probably a smaller one. Okay, so now we're gonna, while it's cooking, 30 minutes to start, and then I'm gonna check it and then baste it and take the lid off, and so that I can let the top of it crisp up. But while we're doing that, we're gonna make a mushroom Wellington. So you may have heard of beef Wellington. It's usually like a big piece of meat wrapped in pastry and baked, and it feels very special and fancy. But we're going to make a version with mushrooms, and it's going to look very impressive, but it's actually not as hard as you think. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a bunch of mushrooms. I went ahead and chopped them ahead of time just to save some time. You need 2 pounds of mushrooms. You need quite a bit, but this is enough to make 2 Wellington. And, mushrooms are going to lose a lot of water and cook down. So you need quite a bit of mushrooms. So, of course, you can, slice them by hand. We just need them sliced. They don't have to be cut up real small. But if you happen to have a food processor, you can slice them up really quickly. And sometimes I don't think it's worth it to use a food processor because you got to clean it. But when you're cutting 2 pounds of mushrooms, I think it's worthwhile. And I can't quite bring it over here, but I'll show you how quick and easy it is. You just take off the lid, and I have the slicing blade in here. Load them up, close it. And I would have to repeat that process a few times if I were cutting 2 pounds of mushrooms, but that wasn't all it took to cut up, several mushrooms, just a matter of a couple of seconds. So I think sometimes it's worthwhile to use that if you do have a food processor. If not, I think it's an extremely useful tool in the kitchen. So I recommend it. Maybe you could ask for one as a gift for the holidays if you don't have one yet. Okay, so we are going to first cook the filling in the skillet. So we want to get that started because we need to cook it first, let it cool, and then use it to fill the pastry and then bake it. So there are a few steps here. So I'm going to heat up 2 tablespoons of oil on a large skillet. It's a lot of mushrooms, so use a big one or use a Dutch oven or a big stock pot. I would recommend using a big wide pan with a lot of surface area because it's really important to get the filling dry. If the filling has moisture left, you're going to end up with a soggy pastry. So, if you have a big wide skillet like that, that's best. Or if you use a Dutch oven, it's tend to be wider, but like a big deep stock pot you could use is probably just going to take a little longer to cook out all the liquid. Okay, so once that's warm, we're gonna throw in the mushrooms and the garlic. So I went ahead and peeled my garlic already. I have about, let's see, that's 5 or 6 cloves. And I'm just gonna chop this up. So yeah, it is a lot of garlic, but again, this will make 2 Wellington and it serves like 10 people. So if the quantities seem high, that's probably why. You could definitely cut this recipe in half. I'm using frozen puff pastry and it comes with 2 in a box usually. So if I only wanted to make one, if I was only making this for, 4 or 5 people, you could just thaw 1 puff pastry and cut everything else in half. And that will make it a little more manageable. Okay, so let's throw in the garlic into the pan. And we're just going to kind of throw most of the stuff in at once. So we're also going to add the mushrooms, and onion and salt and rosemary. But let's just go ahead and let the garlic cook for a second while I chop up the onions. So we're going to use 1 onion diced. And I know not everybody loves mushrooms. If that's the case, this probably isn't a recipe where you can sub something else for the mushrooms because the mushrooms make up the majority of the dish. But I've also seen similar recipes using lentils or other filling. So I probably wouldn't try adapting this recipe. I'd probably just try looking up something else that uses something like lentils as a filling. Okay, and then we're going to use some fresh rosemary in this recipe, but you could also use fresh thyme if you'd like. Okay, let me throw in the onion. Give that a stir. Okay, now we're going to throw in a whole lot of mushrooms. I can't quite put them all in the pan yet, so I'm just gonna let them cook down a little bit and then I'll add the rest. So you can use any kind of mushrooms you want. I'm just using a combination of white and brown mushrooms. Um, if you use something like shiitake mushrooms or something with a thick stem, then just make sure you remove the stems. If you're using, white or brown mushrooms, the stems are fine to leave in there. Okay, those are starting to cook down already. And now let's get the rosemary. So we just need 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary. Yeah, you can use sage or thyme. So I'm just gonna peel the leaves off. The stem tends to be pretty thick. You probably don't want to eat it. And I'll probably need 2 sprigs. And I know sometimes when you buy fresh herbs, you get this whole bunch and you just need like 1 or 2 sprigs. But in this recipe, you can actually garnish it with the leftover rosemary sprigs. But we also have a staff garden on campus where we have a big old rosemary plant. Actually, I think it's 4 different plants that kind of grew into one. So if you want, you can always just grab a sprig from the garden. It's located outside of Mulford Hall by Lee Cushing and Morgan Hall. And we actually go out there once a month, usually the first Friday of the month at lunchtime, to help maintain the garden. And we grow other herbs and native plants and vegetables and all kinds of things. So we have a website, uhs.berkeley.edu/staff garden. So check that out if you're interested in learning more about gardening. Okay, let me give that a stir. Okay, so this is already starting to cook down. Keep it on high heat because you want to cook out all the moisture. So this recipe does take a little patience since you really have to get rid of all the moisture. So what we'll do next, once the mushrooms cook down, is if you want, you can add wine. It's totally optional. I'm just going to skip it in this recipe. It doesn't really affect it if you skip it. I mean, it does contribute some flavor, but we're going to cook it down till the liquid cooks off. So it's not going to affect like the consistency or anything. But if you do want to use wine, you can use sherry or port or red wine, white wine, really anything you want. But we are going to just use some balsamic vinegar, which will give it a little bit of that nice flavor as well. So we'll do that step once the mushrooms cook down. And then we're going to add pecans, which will give it a little flavor and a little bit of a crunch. So it'll kind of vary up the texture a little bit. So it's not all just kind of squishy on the inside. If you don't like the crunch, you can, leave out the pecans, maybe just add a little bit of extra mushrooms or, another vegetable. And we'll add some pepper and salt to taste. So you do want to check the taste before you fill the pastry because you can't really add salt to the inside later. So just salt to taste and, make sure you taste it because we're adding different ingredients that have varying amounts of salt. If you skip it, it's going to change the amount of salt, if you, depending on the type of Worcestershire sauce and stuff you used. So just make sure you taste it. Let's see. So, just checking my notes. Okay, so the pecans that we're gonna add, you're gonna add 1 cup of chopped up pecans, and I went ahead and toasted them already. So to toast your pecans, you can just use a small skillet and just watch it really carefully. They can burn pretty easily. So I just toasted them till they're a little darker in color, which is going to bring out the flavor and make them a little crunchier. I don't know if you can really tell. These are the original pecans in the jar. They're just a little bit darker and crisper after toasting. So I'll bring this over to show you real quick. Here's the mushrooms cooking away. I don't know if you can tell, there's a lot of liquid in there. So you just have to be patient and cook that all out. Something that you can do to speed up the cook time on this is to use the convection oven or the convection function of your oven if you have one. That will speed up the cooking time a little bit. So I'm definitely going to do that once we get the Wellington in the oven. So while we're waiting for that to cook down, I have a couple of other tips. So both of these recipes, you can make some component of it ahead of time, or you can partially cook the whole thing, especially if you're making this for Thanksgiving or a holiday where everybody's in the kitchen, you got lots of things in the oven. So for the Wellington, you can definitely make the filling ahead of time and just refrigerate it overnight. I would probably recommend doing that because you have to wait for it to cool down anyway. So it makes it a lot easier if you just make the filling ahead of time. And then if you want to, you could, fill the pastry, partially cook it till it's just starting to turn a little golden brown, and then refrigerate it overnight and then finish it in the oven the day of. I probably wouldn't bother. I'd probably, bake the whole thing just because that seems a little easier to me. I'd probably just make the filling ahead and then make the pastry the day of. You can also use phyllo dough instead of puff pastry. So puff pastry and phyllo dough are not the same. I'm using store-bought puff pastry. You could make your own. It is a lot of work. But if you've watched any of those baking shows on TV, you've probably seen how they do it, where they, make the dough and then they take this giant thing of butter and fold it and you roll it out and have to do that a few times to laminate it. So puff pastry turns out, I think like it says, puffy. So it's got like the layers of fat in between. And what happens is the fat, or usually butter, it melts and it creates steam and it gives it a rise and it gives it that really nice texture. This brand happens to be dairy free. It's pretty much just flour and oil and a couple of other things. So I think it's technically vegan. But I've seen store-bought brands that are made with real butter, if that's what you prefer. Phyllo dough is just pretty much the like really thin sheets of dough that don't really have any fat in it. So it's used to make things like baklava that are really, really like thin and delicate and flaky. So what you do is you take the sheet of phyllo dough, you brush it with some sort of fat. It could be oil or melted butter or vegan butter if you want. You put down another sheet and you repeat the process. So it's a little bit more intensive. I made the Wellington with this and I used 5 sheets of phyllo and I used store-bought. And it came out like lighter and flakier. So if you like that, you can do that. You could also make it a little thicker. 5 sheets was pretty thin. It still worked, but you could also maybe do like 10 sheets of it. And you'll have a lot left over if you buy store-bought, but those are a couple of different ways you can make it depending on your preferences. Okay, so it's smelling really good in here. I wish you could be here. I definitely smell the rosemary and the garlic and the earthiness and the mushrooms. So this will be really flavorful. I also want to talk a little bit about the roasted cauliflower. So the original recipe that I lightly adapted it from had a few extra spices that I just kind of left out to keep it a little simpler. But they also added other vegetables around the base of the cauliflower. So you could do that if you want, like potatoes and carrots and things like that. I skipped it just to simplify it, but that's what the original recipe said. But I like the a lot of the spices and herbs that were used, especially around this time of year, because they kind of have that holiday feel to them. Oregano, thyme, rosemary, sage. So I just want to show you this. I bought sage in bulk, and I know not everybody lives near a store that sells herbs in bulk, but I got this at Berkeley Bowl, and I brought my own jar. So, you take the tear weight of the jar and you fill it up, and then you measure it before and after. And so they're not charging you for the weight of the jar. I don't use a lot of sage, but I added kind of a lot so it'd register on the scale. I don't know if you can see how much is in there. It's a lot. This cost me 30 cents. I'm sure I'm not going to use this all. And I quickly went into the spice section and I looked really quickly, but I think I saw a jar of sage, maybe half the size, for $8. So this much sage would have cost $16 and I got it for 30 cents. So if you want to save money and want to use, small amounts of herbs that you're not going to use up within like 6 months or a year, buy them in the bulk section. It can save you a lot of money. And things like sage, oregano, thyme, rosemary, those herbs all still have a lot of flavor when you dry them out. Things like basil and parsley are better fresh. They don't really taste like much when they're dried, but these other ones can add a whole lot of flavor with just a small amount of dried herbs. My sleeve got caught on the pan handle there. Okay, so I heard the skillet I heard the volume of the sizzling go up, and that's because the pan is now dry. So we cooked out all the liquid. So we're ready for the next step, which is adding the balsamic vinegar. And we're just adding a little bit, 1 teaspoon. And then we're going to let it dry out again, which shouldn't take long. It's only 1 teaspoon. And adding something like vinegar or wine or broth can also help deglaze the pan if you're not using a nonstick pan. It's going to pick up all those nice flavors that are on the bottom. Okay, so that's going to be dry in just a couple of seconds. So I'm going to add the 1 cup of toasted pecans, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and then if you want, you can also add truffle oil, 2 teaspoons, but you can also leave it out because I know not everybody likes the rich flavor of truffle oil. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that looks. The mushrooms are all cooked. I don't really see any liquid at the bottom of the pan. I added the black pepper and the pecans. This is still really hot, so this will hurt you if you try to fill the pastry at this point. So what I'm going to do to speed this up is I'm going to put it on a baking sheet and put it in the freezer since I'm rushing. If I wasn't rushing, I would just let it cool at room temperature to skip this step and not risk warming up my freezer. And I'm putting it on a baking sheet because I can spread it out, which is going to cool it down way faster than if I put it in like a deep container. Okay, so that's what the filling looks like. You can get a nice view of it. I see a lot of steam. And the cauliflower is roasting away, smelling good. So let me just straighten this up a little bit while we're waiting. So the next step for the cauliflower is going to be to check it, and then we'll baste it with a little more marinade. And then for the Wellington, once the filling is cool, we will wrap it up in the pastry. So I think I'm going to go ahead and bring out one of these. So you want to make sure your puff pastry is thawed if it's frozen, but still cold. So if it's still frozen, it's going to be too crumbly. And if it's too warm, it's going to kind of melt and fall apart. So let's see what we got here. So you should have probably 2 in a box, depending on what brand you buy. Okay, so this is still cold, so I can tell that it's not going to fall apart. So what we're going to do basically is fill down the middle and then wrap it up. So probably the easiest way to do it is to fill it, wrap it, tighten up the ends so you don't have the filling bursting out, and then just score it on the top. But I'm going to show you how to do something that's really easy, but it's going to look really fancy. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do like this woven pattern where we're going to fold it across the top. So what you do for that, I've only done this once, so hopefully I remember. I'm going to cut about 1-inch strips going down the side of the pastry at an angle, maybe like, 45-degree angle. I'm going to do that on both sides. So it does mean you're going to cut a little triangle off the top. Okay, and this will make more sense when I fill it. But in case you want to be extra fancy and maybe if you're a little creative, you can do something fun with the scraps here. I'm going to use a little paring knife and I'm going to make something that's kind of like a little leaf pattern. So it's already kind of leaf shaped. Just going to cut around a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of looks like a leaf, and you can just kind of bend it, make it look like a leaf. Then I'm going to score it to make it look like a leaf. And then I'm just going to stick these in to the pastry once it's ready. So you can do that with the other triangle. Just kind of cutting the corner off. Reshaping it a little bit. I'm going to score it down the middle. Just make it look like a leaf. And set that aside. Okay. So unfortunately, this is not going to be ready by the time the class ends. But hopefully you can get a good idea of how it should look from the photo and the recipes. But let's see if we can at least go ahead and fill one up and get it partially baked. Okay, so here's our filling. Probably still kind of warm, so I'm going to avoid handling it by hand and try to use a spoon. And I'm going to kind of just eyeball half and half on this baking sheet. Tongs are a little bit faster. And if you end up with too much filling and you feel like it's just going to be overflowing, then, that's okay. Maybe just save it and eat it by itself. Don't worry about overpacking it. I think I maybe bought a few too many mushrooms here. Okay, so we have the filling in the middle there. You can see that. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to kind of weave it. You're sort of like braiding the pastry. So do left, fold it over, and then right. And this is going to naturally create these little steam pockets for the filling to escape. And I'm just kind of poking the pastry a little bit into the other end so that it holds well. And then you want to just kind of pinch the ends to seal it so you don't get filling leaking out. But that shouldn't really be a problem as long as you make sure, you know, it's nice and dry. You don't want too much liquid in there. And then what I like to do is just take these leaves and just kind of stick them into one of the folds. Do a couple of them like that. I don't know if you can see that on the camera too well. But I think that extra little step makes it look so nice and it's so easy. Okay. You see. Can't quite find my other baking mat. So we'll read the same one. I'm going to put the extra filling into this bowl so we can at least get one of these in the oven. So into the bowl here. And so you want to line your baking sheet with something. You can use parchment paper. I'm going to use a silicone baking mat because it's reusable. And I carefully get this guy onto the baking sheet. So normally you'd probably be making 2 of these. And then you want to do an egg wash because it's going to help it look nice and shiny and browned. So if you do a traditional egg wash, it's usually just egg mixed with a little water. But you can easily make your own plant-based egg wash that will have the same effect. I'm actually going to do equal parts of a plant-based milk like oat milk, a liquid sweetener like agave or maple syrup, and a little bit of oil. So equal parts of all 3. This will give you kind of similar, I mean, it doesn't sound similar to eggs, but similar browning properties and things that will make it shiny. So I've done a little bit of research on different types of egg washes, and you could use just, you know, melted butter or oil, but I think this combination really gets it a nice finish. Okay, so that timer is for the cauliflower to check it. Oops, make sure you can see that. So I'm just gonna brush it here. The other method, if I have a chance, I'll try to show you. You do the egg wash and then you just score it. And it's even easier than this method that I did here. Make sure you do the egg wash before you score it. That makes it a little bit easier. I'm gonna pop this in the oven. I'm gonna turn it on to convection to speed it up a little bit. And it's been half an hour on the cauliflower, so now we can check it. Okay, so here it is so far. You can see we still have some marinade in there. I had it covered, so it's starting to kind of steam the cauliflower, but now we can baste it with a little more marinade. So I had a little bit left over. The recipe says to do, you may not need more marinade, but it says to add an extra half tablespoon of tamari or soy sauce to your leftover marinade and a little bit of water. So I'm going to do that just to create a little more. And then I'm going to baste it. And you can also use the marinade that's accumulated at the bottom. And you can also save a little marinade or take whatever is left over at the end and baste it again to make sure it's nice and juicy. And then we're going to put it back in the oven and just continue cooking it until it's tender. And so what you want to do is just take a knife and stick it in and wait till it feels tender. Don't overcook it, because I actually did that one time. The first time I undercooked it and it was still kind of crunchy on the middle or on the inside. And then the next time I overcooked it a little bit and then I couldn't get it out of the pan without it breaking. So then it didn't look so pretty. It wasn't a whole cauliflower anymore. Okay. So now the cauliflower should cook for another 20 minutes. We only have a few minutes left, but I think you get the idea of how it should look. It's just gonna, by the end, it's just gonna be a little bit more browned on top because now we're cooking it uncovered. And again, you just wanna make sure you cook it till it's tender. And that depends on the size of the cauliflower. I found a pretty small one, so I'm pretty sure it'll be done in 20 minutes. If you get a medium or a larger one, you might need 30 minutes or even more. So just make sure you're checking it really and making sure that it's done, because it depends on the size and your oven and whether you have convection on or not and all these other factors. So just make sure you check it. For the other Wellington, I'm gonna go ahead and assemble it. So my second puff pastry, and I'm going to show you the slightly easier way to wrap it up. That will still be beautiful, but if you're not so confident in your weaving skills, then this is an even easier way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to fill up the middle here with the filling. Yeah, I have quite a bit of filling left over. I didn't really measure how many mushrooms I got or how much it weighed, so I probably have a lot, a little bit extra. Okay, so just kind of make it evenly shaped in the middle here. And then you're just gonna wrap it up like a little package. You can kind of try to seal off the edges. And wrap it tight. You don't want big air bubbles in here, right? You want it to be nice and filled up. So push that long seam into it. It should be kind of squishy enough that you can do that. You can kind of push the edges down. And then we don't want the seam on top for the finished product. We want that on the bottom. So you can kind of reshape that a little bit if you want. Now we're going to brush it with our egg wash. Oops. I have a little bit of herbs still in my paintbrush from the marinade for the cauliflower, but tried to rinse it, but didn't quite work. Okay, so now you're going to take a sharp knife, or you can use a razor blade, and you're just going to score it. So I'm just going to do a really simple pattern, kind of a crisscross pattern. And you don't have to cut all the way through. This will be enough to kind of, you'll see, hopefully at the end, maybe not in this class necessarily, but if you try making this at home, you'll see it kind of puff up through the cracks a little bit. So just like that. And I'm not gonna have time to bake this one or for you to even see it brown at all. So I'm gonna cook that later. But with the time we have left, let me see how the Wellington looks, see if it's starting to brown at all. Okay, it's been in there a couple minutes. It's already starting to look a little different. So you can kind of see what it looks like as it begins to cook. You can see the filling through the woven part. So unfortunately, this class was supposed to be in person and hybrid. Like we're trying to do all of our classes this semester like that, but we had to change it to virtual only. Um, and it would have been a little easier because when I do the class in person, then I don't actually bake anything during the class. I just show you how to prepare it, and then I have the samples already ready. So it was a little tricky for this class in particular with the long bake time. So I'm sorry that we don't have the finished product available for you to view, but hopefully you got a pretty good idea of it, and you can check the pictures. Um, and yeah, I hope these are recipes that you might want to try for the holidays. Thomas just put in the chat, our next class is also holiday themed. It's a holiday treats class. It's going to be a lot of fun. It will be hybrid, so we'll have it at the Tang Center, or you can watch it virtually on Zoom. But if you come in person, then you get to try everything, and we'll do raffle prizes. And I'm sorry, I know we didn't get to do that today, so maybe I shouldn't talk too much about that. But it's a lot of fun. And these recipes you don't have to just do around the holidays. Honestly, mushrooms are available year round. They're grown indoors in the dark, so the season doesn't really matter. It does matter for forage mushrooms, but that's not something you want to try unless you really know exactly what you're doing. It can be very dangerous if you pick the wrong types of mushrooms. Cauliflower is more of a fall vegetable, but here in the Bay Area, we're pretty lucky. It kind of grows year round. So the class theme was fall and winter seasonal vegetables, but you could make these other times of the year. But I thought they were kind of like special for fall and winter season. So if anybody has any questions, we can take them now. You can put them in the chat, or if you want, you can unmute yourself. And at 1 o'clock, we'll turn off the recording if you want to unmute yourself and say anything without being recorded. So yeah, let us know if you have any questions. And thank you so much for coming. I'll show you the puff pastry one more time, in case it's slightly more brown. Okay, looks about the same. Looks about the same, but maybe while I'm at it, I'm gonna make space and put the other one on here. Yeah, it's starting to cook already. I can hear that it's getting a little crunchy on the bottom. And here's the cauliflower again. Looks about the same. I can tell it's starting to dry out on the top a little bit. Let's see how much it's cooked. So the way to check if it's done is put a knife in it. There's still some resistance. I can tell it's a little crunchy on the inside, so I want to cook it a little bit longer. All right, I think we can go ahead and stop the recording and